Good afternoon, friends. Before we begin our service today, may I invite any of those of you who are carrying electronic devices to please turn them onto silent mode for these few moments so that we might be fully present and share this time together. A reminder that immediately following this service, there will be a coffee reception in the social hall. And we invite you to come there and share your Ron stories and memories with his family. And finally, for those of you who wish to further honor Ron's memory, the family has asked that instead of flowers that you direct donations either to this congregation, the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Grand Traverse, or to the University of Michigan Spinal Cord Injury Model Care System at the Department of Physical Medicine and Rehabilitation. And there are envelopes for both of those available in the hallway if you wish to make a further tribute. Friends, my name is Rabbi Chava Bailey, and it was my privilege to be Ron's rabbi. He didn't even know he needed one. Everybody needs a rabbi, and it was a privilege to be part of his life. In our Unitarian Universalist tradition, and as you know, this was the community where Ron was a member, and his seat is right behind his hang gliding friends there, would be where he would often sit. It is our custom to begin the service with kindling a flame called a chalice. And this symbol evolved in the 1930s and 40s in Europe as a symbol for people who were fleeing Nazi persecution, that the home where the symbol was displayed was a safe house. And so we light the chalice to this very day to remind everyone who comes here that you are safe here and you are welcome. Come, let us light up our hearts. Come, let us light up our home. Breathe in and breathe out, making circles of love. Come, let us light up our world. We light this flame as our fervent plea to brighten the dark corners of our hearts. We hold this flame, for in it is the promise of warmth for souls grown cold in loss and despair. We kindle this light that we might continue to find comfort in its warmth, strength in its light, and holiness in its presence. We follow this light that it might illumine our search for purpose, for meaning, for forgiveness. Knowing even as this sacred spark will be extinguished, in the ensuing darkness, its light, Ron's light, will still burn bright with all the memory and hope of its all too brief flash across our lives. We light this flame of life, of love and truth for the promise of healing hearts, and so may it be. Friends, we are gathered at this hour to celebrate Ron's life. On behalf of family and in the presence of friends, we dedicate this time as a sign of our love and remembrance. Let us be honest with death. Let's not pretend that it's less than it is. It is separation, it is sorrow, it is grief. But let us neither pretend that death is more than it is. It is not annihilation. For as long as memory endures, Ron's influence will be felt. It is not an end to love, for our need for love from each other is boundless. And it is not an end to joy and laughter. So let us be honest with death, for it is in that honesty that we will understand Ron better and ourselves more deeply. Friends, will you join us, please, in turning to hymn number 123 in your gray hymnal, Spirit of Life. And the reason that I chose this particular hymn to open our service today is that you will see in the lyrics, it talks about blowing in the wind and rising in the sea and moving in the hand. And so that sense of riding the wind and rising with the sea feels like a fitting place to begin honoring Ron's life. Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me. Friends, I myself am not a hang glider, having made a promise to my parents that I would not do that until both of them were gone. But in knowing Ron, and particularly since I only knew him in these last years of his life when he was very earthbound, I have to say that I haven't known many people who soared like him. The poem is called "Do Not Stand at My Grave and Weep." Do not stand at my grave and weep. I am not there. I am 1,000 winds that blow. I am the diamond glints on snow. I am the sunlight on ripened grain. I am the gentle autumn rain. When you awaken in the morning's hush, I am the swift uplifting rush of quiet birds in circled flight. I am in the soft stars that shine at night. Do not stand at my grave and cry, I am not there, for in this way, on the 1,000 winds that blow, I do not die. It is an honor to invite some of the many people in our community who loved Ron to speak. A privilege and an honor to invite three people who I am also very personally fond of and think the world of. And they are Dave Halstead, Mark Gustafson, and Bill Scharf.
I just learned that we are privileged to have members of the hang gliding group who are a very important part of Ron's life. I would highly recommend that you talk to them in the time after the service. One of the questions I would suggest that you ask them is, what's it like to hang glide? And I'll let them think about that for the next 45 minutes, but that's a question I would like to have answered, and it was a question that motivated Ron to pursue that activity with such enthusiasm and such dedication. We are here today to celebrate the life of Ron Yatich. I know some of his history, but I may have to ask for help with his history because I only know some of it. He was very athletic all his life until 2007, when he was severely injured in a hang gliding accident. He did not participate in the usual sports in junior or senior high. He worked as a counselor in Garrick Township and Camp Nokomis near Roscommon. I'm certain that was a very important part of his life, and I know nothing about it. Some of you may know something about that, and I would suggest that you share that with others. Ron married Catherine in 1964, and they were married until 1991. I will have to have the cataract surgery at some point, people. They had 2 children. Scott was born in 1970, and his brother Daryl was born in I don't think that's right, in 1969. I also can't write very well. 1967. Oh, thank you very much. We need that kind of cooperation. Scott told me that the family traveled a lot during the summer because his parents had the same vacation time. Those were good times in his memory. Ron camped and canoed with the boys while they were at home. Ron was very active in a variety of activities while he was employed. He had a number of friends with whom he shared these activities. I suspect some of these men's relationship with him go back to those times. When he retired, he traveled to the West a number of times. He and his friends mountain climbed, whitewater rafted, and canoed. They bought several airplanes and flew. He had several sailboats. He had many more things that he did at that time in his life. I don't know what led Ron to become a Unitarian Universalist. He took the training for our whole lives and co-led at least one group. He attended men's group. He was very impressed with Rabbi Hava, her leadership, and her worship services. He designed and built several houses. He did major construction for Mary Van Valen's cabin on Dan's Lake in Ontario. In 2007, he sailed essentially from Lake Michigan down the Chicago River and then into the Tennessee Valley Authority waterway to Mobile, Alabama. Then he sailed down the west coast of Florida to Bermuda and back to Florida. I believe he had intended to sail up the inland waterway on the east coast of Florida, north to the Hudson River, the Erie Canal, and Lakes Erie and Huron back to Lake Michigan. However, he decided he wanted to hang glide across the Florida Panhandle. Remember, he had not hang glided, because that should work. He hadn't hang glided in at least 2 months, if not 3. He wanted to hang glide. Hang gliding was a passion for him. On one part of the flight, he landed too fast and broke his neck. At the time, I understand he was dehydrated and needed liquids. He was not functioning well. He was treated medically in Florida until he could travel to Ann Arbor for further treatment. During this treatment, he learned that he would not improve much after 2 years. By this time, he was back in Traverse City. Some of his hang gliding friends and some from uucgt formed a group, Friends of Ron, because they were afraid he would commit suicide. Help me name these people who were so important to him at this time, and I'll give you a start. Craig Carlson, Scott Maui, Solveig and Mark Gustafson, Richard Miller, Price and Jane Watts, Bob Doty, Mary Van Valen, Mary Ann Force, Jim Cook, Kay Sturgeon, Walter from Sutton's Bay, and Mrs. Walter, I don't know her name, and his wife, yes, Bob Prentice and Carl Kyneth. I know I skipped some of you guys. Any names come to mind who were present there at Friends of Ron? Oh, Bill Scharf, my goodness, you were easy. I didn't write you down. Therefore, sorry. Yes, Bill. Anybody else?
Walter and Beverly.
Walter, thank you. Now I remember Walter and Beverly. Ron lived in tender care for about 2 years. That was where I started to see him. His friends helped him move to the pavilions. He was not suicidal at this time, to my knowledge. Rehabilitation was continued for several years. Many people from uucgt and the hang gliders helped him with this. I know that he was driven to various appointments and places he needed to go, haircuts, places he needed to go by at least Craig, and probably somebody else drove him, and I just don't know that. And there were people from the congregation who did that as well. He continued informal rehabilitation until he lost interest. By and large, he created a lifestyle that was fulfilling. He had a van that helped him be mobile, and he was able to travel in his motorized wheelchair. He was amazingly adept at maneuvering the chair with the joystick. It was a delight to watch him load himself on the van. The clearances were very tight, and he almost always did it initially right the first time. Part of what he did was to observe construction techniques in the neighborhood. This is when he would leave the pavilions and tour his neighborhood. He was caught in the rain and reveled in the experience. I can remember him saying he just lifted his face up and let it come down because he was so pleased to be outside again. He got stuck in snow and mud several times. That was also a rush for him. And he got himself unstuck as well. I think he ran out of power. I'm sorry?
He got himself unstuck
Most of the time he got stuck. Ron did very well on his own. He allegedly was observed driving south on Division Street in the street. After this, the pavilion medical staff withdrew permission for him to have the motorized chair, a loss of freedom from which he never fully recovered. You must remember that when he was in his room in the chair, he could move around the room and go from various device to device and have a change of scene, a change of things to think about. The non-motorized chair, it wouldn't do that, and therefore he was more bound in one place with one set of activities.
That's when he told me he felt like an invalid because he had lost his.
Yes, he was very good at talking about the degrees of invalidism that he felt, and losing the chair made him feel much more, and indeed he was, much more handicapped and troubled with that. Around November 2016, Ron expressed a desire to contact Catherine, but he knew that she was in a committed relationship at the time and was reluctant to disturb her life. I believe he did learn how to do some Facebook with his iPad, something that I have no idea how to do. He did call her several times, especially after her partner died. At the end of his life, he told me he was thinking about watching more sports, which he never did. He was always active. I don't think he ever did much while he was recovering or waiting. So he could join the discussion at mealtime in the dining room. He wanted to be able to socialize more with the people with whom he was a patient. Ron has a grandson, Declan, almost 4, who is very important to him. Declan enjoyed visiting Ron. He will miss his grandfather. When he was healthy, it was difficult for Ron to slow down. Scott and Reggie both talked about how an unusual positive came out of his accident, and that was they got to know him better. After he slowed down, he was more present in many ways.
He helped Scott and Reggie build their home too.
Yes.
Very instrumental in that.
Yes. One of the homes he built was with or for Scott. Ron used to say that it wasn't clear who would be the first to die, Ron or the van. I believe it was a tie. Ron was extremely talented in many areas. Relationships were very important to him. He was very appreciative of the friendship and the help he received. I am sure he was dedicated to his professional work. His ability to create a meaningful life after his injury was inspiring. I will miss him and his inspiration.
Hello, I am Mark Gustafson, and Ron and I were very, very close friends. I knew him before the accident, but more casually than close. And I remember talking on many occasions about different issues. And then one day he mentioned that he was going to sail from Omina to the Bahamas. And I said something like, well, now I know you're crazy because nobody can do that. And he said, oh, yeah, I'm going to do it, and just with my dog, too. And I couldn't believe it. And off he went. And, of course, he did get to the Bahamas. He told me that this was going to be a real high point in his life, and I really think it was. I had rented a home on the International Waterway in Pensacola, just by coincidence, and he and I were keeping contact with each other by email. And I missed him by one day. I moved into the home, and Ron went by. And he sailed out to the ocean and around Key West and to the Bahamas. Absolutely amazing achievement, I think. And then he decided to go hang gliding, of course. My recollection of Ron is that he was a man who I could talk to. He was able to, probably because he had been a counselor, open up and be honest. And he and I had the most intimate conversations. It was a very wonderful thing for me. We would joke, and we would cry, and we would do all the things that two friends did together, I think. After he was injured, I met him at Tender Care. I was there when they brought him. And I remember that evening as a particularly difficult one of my life because Ron had been on kind of a high in Ann Arbor. And he told me on the telephone that he would beat this, that he'd be okay, and that he had a friend, in fact, in Traverse City who would take care of him. I knew that couldn't happen. He was a quadriplegic. It was not possible. And so when I met him at Tender Care, it was a moment of truth, I think. And we both had a good cry, and we both realized that this was it for you, Ron. A couple years later, he was moved, of course, to the pavilions, and I went there to see him every week for a long time, and I drove him many, many times to this church and to movies. Someone asked me, try to remember a movie experience. It's good to laugh. The one I remember is we rolled into the place where he could fit his chair, and he moved forward a little bit. Unbeknownst to him, he had pinned the little old lady in front of him into her chair. And she was too afraid to speak up because she was stuck and she didn't want to raise her hand and say, I'm stuck. So she didn't. And when it was over, she said, now will you move your chair? And he felt so bad. But yeah, it was funny. I had to laugh too. I won't go on anymore. I didn't know I was going to speak today until Hava asked me, because I'm supposed to be in Boston today, but I'm not, am I? You know, I don't know if there's an afterlife. I don't know. For those of you here that might disagree with that, well, you have a right to your opinion. But it seems to me like it doesn't make any sense. I think of Ron as flying like in the picture. Maybe we're all little beams of light that go pss, pss, pss when we die. And maybe Ron's up there zipping across the sky. And if he is, I say, good luck, Ron. And one more thing, Ron. I miss you.
Those are two hard things to follow, Mark. I don't know how much I can add. I'll try. I wanted to divide what I'm going to say before and after the accident. I will though just add that I went to one of the movies with Ron, and we took the Beta bus over there. You remember that? Yeah, we had a good time. Before the accident, hinges back on Ron's building abilities. We know he built much of Scott's house. He built a house in Roscommon, and he built another one in Traverse City, which he sold in order to live on his boat. I'm not sure how many other houses he built, but for a guy who was a teacher, he sure did a lot of building. He was an ultimate builder. As Dave said, he would go around the neighborhood in his wheelchair and look at how people built things and wonder how they did this or that. And he was always marveling. Well, Ron and I belong to a dance group called the Bayside Travelers, which is a country dance group. And we decided as a group that we were going to put a dance floor into Twin Lakes. That's the place where we have our Thanksgiving celebration. And Mary Van Valen, one of our people, was the banker for it. She took the donations and so forth. And one of our people drove a semi-truck and was able to pick up a load of plywood so we could put down a subfloor. The actual oak was put down by another place, which was specified that we had to use that place to put down the oak wood. And anyway, we had this load of plywood, and it was CD plywood. CD means it had a C side and a D side. The D side was pretty bad stuff. I'm sure Carl understands that. Anyway, Ron had a sixth sense. We had to cut these pieces of 4x8 plywood into various shapes. And as we cut them, they would fit like into a puzzle. And I thought, gee, I can do this. The specification was, though, that the C side had to be up and the D side had to be down. So I went ahead and cut one, and I had the D side up, the C side down. And everyone said, that's the last piece you're going to cut. Well, Ron thought that was kind of humorous too. We had waste left over then, is what we had. But the real stickler in this floor building business was that there were some elevation differences. Once you put in the subfloor and the oak floor, you had an elevation difference between some of you who've been out to Twin Lakes know that there's 2 doors for the kitchen and one door for the entrance door. Well, Ron knew exactly what to do for that. He built the thresholds. And little did he know that soon he would be in a wheelchair and have to make those thresholds himself. So it was some sort of prescience that helped him do that. Well, after the accident, Mark and Solveig Gustafson had a meeting that they called Friends of Ron. And at the Friends of Ron, I remember Jim Cook and Bill Mathias and myself, and I don't remember who else was there. Anybody here that I'm leaving out? Okay, maybe we don't remember all the way back there. But we were taking care of Ron and driving him to his appointments and things like that at Tender Care. And Tender Care is where he got his van. And then we would take him, as I say, to the appointments that he had, and generally try to make life a little bit better for him up there. One of the people who did that was Mary Ann Force's daughter named Liz. Liz worked up there at that time, and Ron was a favorite of hers. Then of course, Ron moved to the pavilions where the things were a little bit better and a little bit easier up there. I can remember sorting photos, some of the same photos that you see out there, sorting photos with Ron and doing exercises with the exercise bands that he had. The photos reveal that Ron had had a very fulfilling and full life up till that point. So many trips and so many hang gliding events that he was on. Ron was very much interested in airplanes, as you might suspect, and I did a lot of wildlife surveys in some of the old airplanes too, and so we had a good thing to talk about there. He flew out of Roscommon. He belonged to a flying club, and had, according to Scott, he had several airplanes at various times through a club. And I talked to him, I'll bet you, Ron, that you never flew into Home Acres over at Lake City. And sure he had. That was one of the places he went to. He also had horses, and he was an avid horse lover.
Until he started hang gliding.
Until he started hang gliding.
And I did a lot of leg work at the initial hang gliding.
Okay. My favorite memories of Ron are racing him down the hall at the pavilions. He in the wheelchair, and I trying to keep up. And probably the most poignant of all memories that I have of Ron was the time that we came to Christmas Eve here at this church, and we had Don Vaughn as the pastor, and it's just a very poignant thing in my mind. So those are my memories of Ron.
And now if you turn to page 108 in the gray hymnals and sing along, My Life Flows On, an Endless Song. My life flows on. My life flows on in endless song above earth's lamentations. I hear the real, though far off hymn that hails a new creation. Through all the tumult and the strife, I hear the music ringing. It sounds an echo in my soul. How can I keep from singing? What though the tempest round me roars? I know the truth it liveth. What though the darkness round me close? Songs in the night it giveth. No storm can shake my inmost calm, while to that rock I'm clinging. Since love prevails in heaven and earth, how can I keep from singing? When tyrants tremble as they hear the bells of freedom ringing, when friends rejoice both far and near, how can I keep from singing? To prison cell and dungeon vile, our thoughts to them
my shame are undefiled, how can I keep from singing?
Can I say just one thing? I wasn't quick on the draw. Can I say a couple of words in remembrance of Ron?
Sure. Sure.
Those of you who don't know me, my name is Yatich, and I first met Ron in, get this, 7 decades ago. Okay, I was his best friend. He was my best friend in junior high school and in high school. In fact, Ron is the godfather to 2 of our children. On the way up here this morning, we came from Troy. We were going through some of this, and I had realized that I have been with Ron for, in different respects, for 7 decades, since I was about 14 and he was also 14. We both graduated from Seaholm High School in 1960, and we were very good friends, on and off. We always maintained contact. We talked about Ron's building. My sons and I have a cabin over on the Saddle River, and Ron also helped us build that. We built that with our own hands, and Ron used to come over and spend days with us when we were doing that. One thing I'll remind Ron, if he's listening, is that Ron and I used to argue about which of us was the tallest. I invite you to look at the picture there. He's taller. So you should understand that. When you all talk about hang gliding and you talk about the sailboat, that's just the beginning of it. The first sailboat that Ron had, the 2 of us built ourselves when we were in high school. And that sounds really great, but the end of the story was that after we built it, and my mother helped make the sail, we took it up to Higgins Lake, and then we flipped to see who could sail it first. And he won the toss. He proceeded to sail out into the lake and into Higgins Lake. And I was on the beach, and I kind of drifted off until I looked out, and the sailboat was sinking. This is hard to believe. I had to go and get a boat, and it turns out that when we built the boat, it had 2 what they call drain cocks to drain the chamber, and both of them had come out, and the hull had filled with water. So we dragged the boat back, and the boat ended up about a year later rotting. We all talk about Ron, and there's 2 things I will always remember about Ron. His incredible sense of adventure. I'm not sure anybody can ever overstate what a sense of adventure that he had. It was almost beyond description. The last point that I always remember about Ron is from the day that I saw him after the accident in Jacksonville. I went down there to see him. Till the last time I saw him, he never once wanted me or anybody else to feel sorry for him. He absolutely refused that. And he made it clear to me on several occasions when I would start to drift it that that's not what he wanted. And for that, I thank you, Ron.
Thank you, Eli. Thank you. Holy friends, such a life. Such a life. Beloveds, as you know, Ron died on January 10th at the Pavilions. His life began on June 5th, 1942, in Highland Park. Ron had a brother who died, who was not mentioned in his parents' obituaries because it was a great pain to his family. I also come from a family with a sibling who passed, and this was a topic that Ron and I spoke of more than once. After he graduated with you from Seaholm, Ron earned his bachelor's and his master's degrees and began his teaching career. He would eventually retire from Camp Nokomis after 27 years as a teacher and counselor there. Now, Nokomis is named, as you know, from Henry Wadsworth Longfellow's poem, The Song of Hiawatha. Nokomis is an important character in the poem, mentioned in the familiar lines, "By the shores of Gitchigumi, by the shining big sea water, stood the wigwam of Nokomis, daughter of the moon Nokomis. Dark behind it rose the forest." And this was a place that Ron felt extremely fulfilled from what he said, enjoyed working with his counselees, but also enjoyed the beauty of the setting. His sense of adventure was something that he came by naturally. Your father, or your grandfather rather, Dr. Ron, proudly served, Ron's dad served in the U.S. Navy for 2.5 years, where he served in the Asiatic Pacific and on the Pacific Fleet on the USS Republic. Ron's mother, Dorothy, lived most of her life in the Detroit area with her beloved husband, Don. And she enjoyed researching your family heritage, and apparently you can trace some of it to the 10th Continental Congress. So your family goes back quite a ways. She spent most of her time as a mother and grandmother. Dorothy worked at the chiropractic office, from what I read, and in so many ways, Ron's parents were a terrific pair. They enjoyed traveling together and especially enjoyed many trips with something called the Nomads Travel Club. So Ron had this in his genes. Nomads indeed. After Ron retired, as you know, he pursued many interests, climbing Mount Rainier and becoming what is known as a looper. America's Great Loop is first and foremost an idea. The idea that you can navigate thanks to locks and canals intended to aid commerce all the way around the eastern half of the United States in your own boat. Forget for the moment the logistic challenges of this 6,000-mile adventure. Forget that many of us never spend regularly more time than a weekend aboard, let alone months required to complete the journey. Forget, too, the mental hurdle of leaving behind your life on land, if only temporarily. These were things that, rather than creating a sense of foreboding for Ron, challenged him to great adventure. The Great Loop takes us, as Dave said, through the intercoastal waterways, the Great Lakes, the Rideau Canal, and the Mississippi and Tennessee waterways. But Ron's real passion was hang gliding. He became a lifelong member of the U.S. Hang Gliding Association, the USHGA. And after completing half of his loop by sailing from Traverse City through Chicago, down the Mississippi River to Florida on his sailboat called the Sweetie, Ron took that flight over Florida, and for 4.5 hours, he soared. I don't choose to focus a lot on the part of Ron's life that was about the accident because I only knew him after that, and I knew a man that, although he used a wheelchair, was one of the least earth-bound people I have ever known in my entire life. Many months after the accident, when Ron was interviewed, he said that one of the lessons he learned from hang gliding. And it moves me because he gave me this piece of advice. When I asked him about a challenge I was facing, he said, "You are the pilot in charge of your own life." His sense of adventure, as you know, was not lost, particularly when he was outfitted with the motorized wheelchair. Ron was not a saint, however. He could be, to say the least, a little bit defiant. This defiance included use of said wheelchair when running down some of the slower residents at the pavilions. And Scott said to me that when he sees Declan running around at full speed, sometimes he thinks, "Oh my Ron." Ron's friend Sarah posted on Ron's Facebook page that she was so sorry to hear that her longtime and very dear friend had passed away, that he was the most adventurous person she had ever known and always ready for something new. He was very blessed to be a member of this congregation and that he was always there when she needed him. And she said, "I'm so sorry I wasn't able to come to be with him when he needed me." And one of the things I want to assure you, because I know those of you who love Ron, and particularly those of you who don't live immediately nearby, sit with the question, did I do enough? Was I there enough? And I just want to bless you to know that he was so appreciative of all of the love and kindness that he received. And he never, at least in my presence, counted noses of who was there and who stopped by and who didn't. His was only a sense of appreciation for the love and friendship that he received from each and every one of you. So thank you for the love that you showed. I want to acknowledge Daryl and Sherry are here today, and we are honored to have you in this place that your dad loved so much. Scott and Reggie, and I see Declan is elsewhere, no doubt being adventurous. I want to especially say to the two of you, your dad was a very good man. He was a caring man. He was a loving man. And I want to bless you to carry a little of that forward as you go forth from this day. Catherine, it is such a testament to both you and Ron that you are here with us today and that neither of you ever put each other out of your hearts. And this speaks so beautifully to the kind of person that you are and the kind of person that indeed he was. In addition to his parents, Ron, as I said, was preceded in death by his brother Arthur and several of his hang gliding pilot comrades, Harold and Scott, Mark and Todd, Charlie, Dick, and Chris. I especially want to extend blessing to those people from this community who helped Ron in so many ways live a full, blessed, friendship-filled life, and acknowledge the people from the pavilions who were there for him, although he did not always agree with the decisions that they made about his care. Especially for those of you who are a part of that august circle called Friends of Ron. I say to you, blessed are the caregivers. Blessed are the caregivers who learn to laugh because it keeps you sane. Blessed are the caregivers who accept the people who have disabilities and let each person develop at his or her own speed. Blessed are the caregivers who can redirect negative behavior without anger. Blessed are the caregivers who involve their charges in the world around them because it develops the whole person. Blessed are the caregivers who are teachable, for understanding brings love. Blessed are the caregivers who loved Ron, because love is the greatest gift that you have given him. And blessed are the caregivers for all of the blessings that they bestow upon the world. Friends, it was my privilege to know Ron in these last few years of his life. And we often joked about the fact that he would sleep sometimes loudly when I was preaching, and later apologize. And I said, I think you're representing a solid 50% of the congregation there, Ron. So I think it's okay. But I want to tell you 2 Ron stories that I will take away with me, and then I will stop. One is that we have a little child in this congregation who loved more than anything to sit on Ron's lap when he was in the motorized wheelchair, and Ron would let him drive. And this is like a toddler. Like he was letting a toddler drive. But to see the look of joy, not only on Ron's face, but to see how safe and happy that child felt in his presence was really a great gift. And it teaches us that no matter what our physical ability, we are able to touch each other in joy. And that is one of the lessons I will take from his life. The other is a day on which we both had a good cry. And it was the day on which we discussed the fact that he was not going to be getting the motorized wheelchair back. This was an enormous loss of freedom for him, an enormous loss of a sense of independence for him. And I wouldn't say he was complaining, but he was honest about the experience and what that meant for him. And I felt very fortunate to have that intimacy with him where he could truly, as you said, Dave, open up his heart so deeply. What a blessing it was to know him. And so it is in that spirit that we look to the skies that are a little gray and a little still today and say, shifting haze, so slowly trailing through wood and field, now veiling melancholy skies, holding back the tears with wild geese flying to meet other years. Flames of crimson torches come flinging, leaves on gnarled branch swinging, desolate wings rush leaping, taking flowers to their final sleeping. In the groaning of the atmosphere, unfolding sorrows weep with this fading time. Fields of cluttered stubble are tangled with rampant weeds, dewdrops spangled. Flocks of birds leave flying over fields of corn and drying thistle. Then the dream fades, paling through a grandeur all prevailing, when the sunset fire lights sky and sea, and sink in the breath of eternity. Friends, will you join me in reading responsively in the order of your service book, We Remember Him. In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we remember him. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we remember him. In the opening of the buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember him. In the blueness of the skies and in the warmth of summer, we remember him. In the rustling of leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we remember him. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember him. When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember him. When we are lost and sick at heart, we remember him. When we have joys we yearn to share, we remember him. So long as we live, he too shall live, for he is now a part of us as we remember him. Friends, will you rise as body and spirit will allow for a moment of silent reflection on the life of Ron. Friends, we are in a time when each of us is called to be part of healing the world. And the hymn, Love Will Guide Us, which is in your gray hymnal on page 131. It says, if you cannot sing like angels, if you cannot speak before thousands, you can give from deep within you. And this message about whether we are able-bodied or have differently abled bodies, whether we have great capacity or small capacity, the one thing we can always do is love. And what a delight to sing this in Ron's honor, because I think this is something he was really good at. Will you join us in singing?
Love will guide us, peace has dried us, hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard night. If you cannot sing like angels, if you cannot speak before thousands, you can give from deep within you. You can change the world with your love. Love will guide us, peace has dried us, hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard night.
Friends, will you be seated? Sea Fever by John Masefield. I must go down to the seas again, to the lonely sea and sky, And all I ask is a tall ship and a star to steer her by. And the wheels kick and the wind's song and the white sails shaking and the gray mist on the sea's face and a great gray dawn breaking. I must go down to the seas again, for the call of the running tide is a wild call and a clear call that may not be denied. And all I ask is a windy day with white clouds flying and the flung spray and the blown spume and the seagulls crying. I must go down to the seas again, to the vagrant gypsy's life, to the gull's way and the whale's way where the wind's like a whetted knife. And all I ask is a merry yarn from a laughing fellow rover, and quiet sleep and a sweet dream when the long trip is over. Friends, Ron is no longer with us to share the beauty of the passing moment. Yet we sense his presence in our hearts. What he meant to us does not wither and it does not fade. For a time we touched hands, we touched hearts. Still his voice abides with us. Still his memory is with us. We are profoundly glad that Ron lived. Carrying him in our hearts, we go forth from this place in comfort and peace, assured that even in this time of ending, life remains precious and good. May we on this day rekindle in our hearts an appreciation for the gifts of life and love and each other. May the power that heals the broken heart grant consolation to those who mourn. Again, we particularly recognize the members of Ron's family and give them the strength and courage and restore to them a sense of life's goodness. May we all be filled with reverence and love, and may we know peace. Sorry? Oh. Sorry. As we return to the routine of our lives, go now in peace, and may the memory of this good man be for a blessing. And may the blessings of this community be on us in this hour and during our days and weeks to come, that we may seek the truth more devotedly, that we might be a little more adventurous, that we might love a little more freely, that we might gather a little more thoughtfully, and that we might reach out a hand to those who might welcome it, and that we may live more nobly. Friends, we extinguish this chalice, but not the light and the love and the life that it represents. So although this candle is extinguished, the memory and the love that we have of Ron is forever. For the gift of this day and for our community of spiritual nurture and compassion, we give thanks. We have lighted this chalice as a symbol of our faith. May our sparks meet and merge in the communion of heart and soul. So may it be. Will you please rise, friends? And it is our custom in this congregation to invite the family of Ron to please lead us out where they will greet you in the hallway. There's food and drink, an opportunity to hear more stories. And if you have a Ron story that his family might not know, this would be a wonderful time to share it with them. Thank you, friends. Will you please rise?